I was putting up my nativity scene at home and it occurred to me to think who would have been the first to put up a nativity scene. Also, in many places people call the nativity scene nativity, portal, manger. It has many names, but they all represent the same thing, the day the child Jesus came into the world. There are many ways to represent that day. Some just put the child with Mary and Joseph, others put the Holy Family with a donkey and an ox, others add the 3 wise men, and finally if you visit nativity scenes at Christmas you will have seen that many they are full of shepherds, houses that light up, rivers with real water, mills, camels, true works of art. The original story is as follows. With very little time left for Mary to give birth to the child Jesus, there was a law that ordered all citizens to return to their hometown to be registered. The census is the count of how many people live in a country. Jose and Maria then went to Bethlehem, which was the small town of origin of Jose's family. In those times the routes were made walking, step by step, in carts, or mounted on some animal, a horse, a mule, or in the case of Maria on a donkey. It took them a long time to get to Bethlehem, because they made their way little by little, and when they finally reached the town it turns out that all the inns were full, all the houses were occupied with visitors, and Mary was already about to give birth to the child Jesus. They looked everywhere for someone to give them shelter, but all the doors they knocked on were closed to them. No one had compassion for Mary who was in pain, because Jesus was about to be born. Finally, someone offered them a stable to shelter in, and it was in that manger that baby Jesus was born, surrounded by Mary, Joseph, the little donkey that had accompanied them on the road, and an ox that slept in that stable. That happened more than 2,000 years ago. You will not tell me that it is not a long time. Since then everyone remembered that date with celebrations, family reunions, dinners, and of course with religious celebrations. But, why do we put a portal of Bethlehem in our houses? Who first came up with that idea? Well, look. The birth of the child Jesus occurred more than 2,000 years ago, and it was not until the year 1223 that in Italy, a very, very poor monk, it crossed his mind to remember Christmas Day with a nativity or Bethlehem. This monk was Francis of Assisi. He was so poor that he dressed in rags. Rags are very worn clothes, with many patches and holes through which cold and water seeps. Francisco lived on what people gave him, a little piece of bread, a bunch of grapes, an apple. That Christmas, to reward the good people who shared their food with him, he decided to look for a cave. He talked to a villager to lend him an ox, and he asked another to lend him a donkey. He looked for a manger. The manger is the place where they put straw for the animals in the stable so they can eat on the days they don't go out to graze in the fields, and of course the most important thing was missing. He then went to the village and was asking if any baby had been born in those days. He found it and, talking to the mother and father, convinced them to go on the 24th of December because they would perform the representation of the birth of the child Jesus. Then with everything ready he made a proclamation. The proclamations were the way to announce the news to the people. One would stand in the middle of the town square and announce this or that news. Francis did so, stood in the middle of the square and announced to everyone that on the 24th in the mountain cave they would perform the representation of the birth of the child Jesus. Before there was no radio, telephone or television, the news was transmitted from one to another, and so those who heard the news in the middle of the square told their neighbors and they told others, and so the whole region he found out about that strange thing that Francisco would do on Christmas Day. We say strange because until then no one had thought of such an idea. On Christmas Day the people gathered in front of the entrance of the cave and then they moved some planks that they had put up and everyone was amazed. There was the ox, the donkey, Maria and Jose with the child. Well, they weren't Maria and Jose, but they played the part like good improvised actors. They were also excited to see that first portal of Bethlehem that from that day on every year they wanted to repeat the staging. The news of what happened in that little cave and Francisco's idea soon spread throughout Italy. Everyone wanted to do the same. Over the years, wooden figurines began to be made so that everyone could put his nativity in temples and homes. As time went by, Francisco's idea spread throughout the world and today people put the nativity scene, nativity, portal or manger in their homes. And so from an idea of Francisco in the year 1223 is that today we have such a beautiful custom.